A very good morning to all of you. As I mentioned earlier in yesterday's lecture, we talked about merits of Shakespeare with reference to Johnson's preface to the plays of William Shakespeare. Johnson praises Shakespeare for many of his great qualities as a great dramatist. He defends Shakespeare for his intermingling of tragedy and comedy as an attempt to bring reality because life is full of all such things. Life is not only happiness or not merely sorrow, it is the combination of both. Therefore, he defends, and I told you that neoclassicists of his period, Dryden, Alexander Pope, and others, were of the opinion that ancient dramatists have set the model and have been always great. And there was an argument between the ancients and moderns, the greatness of ancients and moderns. And in this particular aspect, in terms of this argument, Johnson comes up with his comment on this argument with reference to William Shakespeare's plays. He's full of praise for William Shakespeare, as we understood in a trade lecture day before yesterday. At the same time, we understood certain merits of William Shakespeare from Johnson's point of view. In this part of our lecture, I shall be talking about the demerits. Now, the first demerit that Dr. Johnson mentions is that he sacrifices. He means Shakespeare. I quote Johnson here. He sacrifices virtue to convenience and is so much more careful to please than to instruct that he seems to write without any moral purpose. So this is the first demerit or defect that he finds in Shakespeare's writing. As I mentioned, Dr. Johnson says he means William Shakespeare sacrifices. To sacrifice means, you know it very well, to make compromise with something. Here in this context, we need to understand. So he sacrifices virtue. He abandons virtue for his convenience. Virtue means the good side of human life, good qualities. And he sacrifices virtue to convenience, for the sake of convenience, for bringing easiness, lucidness in his plays. Shakespeare many a time sacrifices virtue. And he is more careful, means he takes care of entertaining the audience rather than instructing them. Johnson thinks that there is no moral purpose in Shakespeare's writing. Aristotle was also of the opinion that literature, poetry should please and instruct, should please and teach, entertain and instruct the audience. Dr. Johnson does not find this combination in William Shakespeare's writing. He writes only for the sake of entertaining audience. That's what he thinks. Of course, there are differences, and there can be opposition to Dr. Johnson's writing, because as a reader, we also think that there is much more to learn from Shakespeare's plays. However, Dr. Johnson thinks that Shakespeare was more careful to please than to instruct his audience. He writes without any moral purpose. Further, he thinks that Shakespeare lacks poetic justice. Now you might be knowing the meaning of the term poetic justice. By poetic justice, we understand that eventually the characters from the particular play or fiction undergo kind of suffering or they get reward for their deeds. So that is what poetic justice is. But William Shakespeare makes no such distribution of good or evil. Means we generally think that your good deeds are rewarded with good things, and your bad things are rewarded with punishment. So that is what poetic justice is. But William Shakespeare makes no such distribution of good or evil. That's what Dr. Johnson observes. Of course, as I said earlier, there are many points that Johnson makes with which we may not agree. Here, we cannot agree with Johnson. Because as we're talking about the merits of Shakespeare, he himself called him a poet of nature. Okay, he combines both evil and good things, good sides of human life. And at the same time, here he makes a contradictory statement. So that makes us disagree with Johnson. Of course, as you know, neoclassical school of writing, neoclassical school of literature, believed in moralizing or believed in didactism, teaching society. And he thinks from that perspective. He is bound to think from that particular tradition of his age. Therefore, he finds some faults with Shakespeare in terms of morality. As you know, Shakespeare gives us a picture of life. If you have read a poem, all the world is a stage. So he talks about the 7 stages of human life. So that is a picture of human life. He observes human life very honestly, systematically, and creates the picture of that life in his place. He holds a mirror to his audience. He shows the reality. We are all familiar with this particular quality of William Shakespeare. But Johnson has certain reservations, certain negative perceptions about Shakespeare's morality. So that is what makes us disagree with him. But didactism means teaching. Didactism, which is expected from a true artist, cannot be basic condition of art. The basic function, the main function of any piece of art is to entertain. And then while entertaining, one can teach. But didactism emphasizes more on teaching itself. And because of that, Johnson finds this defect in Shakespeare. Okay, so this particular dualism of Johnson is a matter of evaluation. He sees certain kind of defects in William Shakespeare, and that is a matter of criticism. Of course, we can see that while talking about the merits, he refers to Shakespeare as a poet of nature. So that makes us to rethink over Johnson's observation. Another demerit that Dr. Johnson observes in Shakespeare's plays is that Shakespeare's plot construction has also faults. Means he finds faults with William Shakespeare's plot construction in many of his plays. According to Johnson, William Shakespeare constructs plot very loosely. The plots in his plays are often loosely formed, and they develop carelessly. They are carelessly pursued. Means there is no systematic and logical connection between the actions and events. I quote Dr. Johnson. He omits opportunities of instructing or delighting which the development of the plot provides to him. Unquote. He means William Shakespeare. Omits opportunities means he does not take the opportunity of instructing or delighting when the plot gives him that opportunity. Again, in many of his plays, this delighting part is neglected. And to some extent, this particular charge, this particular observation is true. In many of his plays, especially when we talk about Julius Caesar, the readers lose dramatic interest in the second half of the play. But when you read The Merchant of Venice, The Merchant of Venice shows a perfect sense of plot construction. Means Johnson's criticism is not applicable to all of Shakespeare's plays. It is applicable to certain exceptions. You can say Julius Caesar. Now let's go ahead to the third criticism, the third defect that Johnson finds in William Shakespeare's plays. So his charge is that against Shakespeare is that regarding the distinction of time and place. Yesterday only I mentioned, Shakespeare does not care for the unity of time and place. Okay. Means Shakespeare attributes to a certain nation, a certain period of history, the customs, practices, and opinions of another. So this is an example of anachronism. Yesterday I gave you the example. Anachronism. For example, in Julius Caesar, there is the use of the mechanical clock. Mechanical clocks were not available in the period of Julius Caesar. So this is what, is somewhat ridiculous, somewhat funny, because it does not follow the unity of time. He attributes, means he gives certain nation or certain period of history, the customs, practices, and opinions of another. For example, I'll tell you, suppose a character is from England, and he gives the qualities of, let's say, the Caribbean island to that character. Or let's say that if the person belongs to 12th century, and he attributes the qualities of 15th century to that character. So this is a bit funny. Now let's see one example. Hector in his play Troilus and Cressida quotes Aristotle. Okay, so Aristotle was not there when Hector, means this Troilus and Cressida was written. So this is what a bit funny. Now I would like to tell you one example of a Marathi play, Yada Kadachit. Of course, that is deliberate, that is satirical. In Yada Kadachit, we find Duryodhan and Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, coming together on the same stage. So this is an example of anachronism. Okay, and William Shakespeare's plays are full of such examples. Of course, Johnson does not regard it as a fault of Shakespeare. Okay, he does not take it as the violation of the laws of unities. Rather, this violation proves the comprehensive genius of Shakespeare. That's what he says. I give the example of Yada Kadachit. Duryodhan says to Mahatma Gandhi in the last scene of the play, had you been there, I wouldn't have been Duryodhan at all. So this makes us to think over Gandhi's greatness. If you were there, maybe the things would have been a bit different. So he criticizes the very role of Lord Krishna in Mahabharata. And he prefers Gandhi to Krishna. That's what we can understand. So that is a satirical play, of course. So here we're talking about the demerits. He refers to this quality of William Shakespeare, but he thinks that this violation of the unity of time and place shows the comprehensive genius of Shakespeare. He can bring anything in at any time, at any place. Okay, so actually a drama indicates successive actions. So as the people are represented at successive places, they may be represented at different periods, separated by several years. Just now I give the example of Eda Kadachit. So Shakespeare violates the unities of time and place. Means he bring the character of 12th century and 15th century. And according to Johnson, the unities of time and place are not essential to a just drama. There are always to be I'm quoting Johnson here. Shakespeare's sacrifice of the unity of time and place is defended by Johnson. What he says, this unity of time and place are to be sacrificed for the nobler beauties of variety and instruction. Okay, for example, when Duryodhana is brought in modern period, so that purpose is to, there is a nobler purpose. Okay, and there is a purpose of instruction as well. And on the other hand, the plays, scrupulously following the unities are just the product of superfluous and obstinacious art. Means if certain plays follow the unities of time and place very strictly, they may sacrifice with the content of the play, with the theme of the play, and it may become superfluous. Superfluous means something which lacks the depth, lack of depth, we can say. Although Shakespeare does not observe the unity of time and place, he observes the unity of action. So this is the positive side. And Johnson, although finds this defect in Shakespeare, does not have much negative opinion about this particular violation. Now let's come to the last part of his discussion on the demerits of Shakespeare. According to Johnson, Shakespeare's another fault is in the his fondness for quibbles. Quibble means pun, use of language, playing with language. So he uses too much. A quibble was to him the fatal Cleopatra for which he lost the world and was content to lose it. This is what Johnson thinks. I quoted Johnson. A quibble means the play with language, the play with word. So just like Cleopatra, for the sake of Cleopatra, Antony lost his kingdom and all. Antonio and Cleopatra were knowing. So same in the case of William Shakespeare. Playing with words is a kind of, sacrifice he's doing. Means as Antony lost his kingdom for the sake of Cleopatra. So Shakespeare is losing his name and fame. But to say Johnson here sacrifices his strong common sense for the sake of an eloquent metaphor. Johnson thinks that William Shakespeare loses his common sense just for the sake of metaphor, just for the sake of language, impressive words. So Shakespeare's comic dialogue is often coarse, not standard, not refined. and the gentlemen and ladies in the comic scenes show little delicacy, refinement. Okay, and can not they cannot be differentiated from the clowns, from the people, funny people. It does not differentiate between, well, in the use of language, I mean to say. Means for him, the king, the prince, or whoever, and the clown, the ordinary person, are all one and the same, especially in comedies. Further, his tragic plays become worse in proportion because he uses too much of pun, too much of quibbles. Shakespeare's narration shows an undue pomp of diction, an unnecessary verbise and repetition. So this is the comment on his language and the use of language. Undue, unnecessary pomp of diction. Diction means the choice of words. That is undue, that is unnecessary to the situation. And his declamations of said speeches are generally cold and feeble. His speeches, now the speeches by Brutus, speeches by Julius Caesar, speeches by Antonio in Julius Caesar, and in any other play, he thinks that are cold and feeble. They are not that much impressive. So when he does not use that, then that becomes the best part of his play. Okay, so this is how Johnson finds faults with Shakespeare, but still he has got a very high opinion about Shakespeare's abilities and qualities. So that's what we understand.